Hey, I'm Ian.
I'm Lauren.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Peter, and this is
Spaces.
Hey, y'all, welcome to Spaces. We're really excited today because we're starting a new series, and it's going to be on mental health. And to launch our new series, we invited a very special guest.
Very special.
Very special. Kind of like Leo. We have Michal Anne Whitcomb joining us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
She is a licensed professional counselor at the Dallas Counseling Group. And so really excited for what she's going to bring today. Our first topic is loneliness. And before we dive into it, I do want to talk about a little bit of our why behind it. We were having a conversation. It was Lauren, Leo, and I, and we felt like this was a really important place to start when we're talking about looking at mental health. And Lauren, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about why we're starting here with loneliness.
So the reason why we're doing loneliness is because with COVID going around, we kind of thought that this is a very important topic that we need to talk about, especially with Gen Z. Not even just Gen Z, honestly, just the people in general, and what this time can really bring upon a person. And, it's really difficult to be alone. And we're going to be talking about what exactly loneliness is and what that looks like, what it feels like, So, yeah, excited to talk about that.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited because this is starting together with our new series, the Canyon Creek Project, which is bad theology and mental illness.
There's a plug.
Whoa!
Join us on Saturday.
Loving this out. So I'm excited about the possibility because I think there's a lot of things going on, a lot of dynamics that are happening within the home, the school environment, the work environment that really need this type of attention.
So with that, let's dive in. Michal Anne, we hear this word a lot, loneliness. I feel lonely, or a lot of times I think about that like a dating app. Like I feel lonely, so I'm gonna get on Tinder, or I'm gonna, something. So I have a question. Like, what is loneliness, and what isn't loneliness? Like, what is the difference there?
So I like looking at that differentiation. So what loneliness isn't is it's not necessarily just being alone. Because as we were saying earlier, the truth is that any of us can experience loneliness in a room full of people around others. So loneliness I would describe as an emotional response. It goes beyond sadness, but it's an emotional response to a need for connection, and a lack of connection. Maybe going even beyond that to saying a lack of being known.
So you're saying loneliness is like a symptom or a byproduct of disconnection.
Yeah. It's an emotional response to that.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. Or just because when I typically think of loneliness, I think a lot of times it's like, I want to get rid of it, or I feel like it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about what are some of the implications of it being like just like a symptom? Like should we pay attention to it? Is it something we should just kind of get over?
Right. Yeah. What do we do with that? Well, I mean, when it comes to feelings, the truth is that it's always valid to pay attention to our feelings, and it's very important to pay attention to our feelings. And so when I have an emotional response, especially when I'm happy, when I'm excited, when I'm joyful, whatever those feelings are easy feelings to have typically for most of us, right? So we're willing to just be present with it, to experience it. They're easy feelings to have. Loneliness, though, I think, and along with other feelings that might be a little bit more uncomfortable for us, I think we all do have that response of I want to get rid of this. I want to escape this feeling. I want it to stop right now. I don't
become numb, right?
Yeah. I want to do whatever I can do to stop feeling this way. And so, I think that oftentimes that is the response that we have. And your question of, what do we do with this? this seems really counterintuitive to us most of the time, but I think the best place to start with any feeling, but particularly as we're talking about loneliness, is to learn to get comfortable with it. To kind of fight that initial response of, I want to stop this, I want to escape this, I want to do something to fix this feeling, and instead kind of reframe that and shift that mindset to say, what would it be like if I learned to tolerate it, to get comfortable with the feeling for a little bit?
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, there's two things I would like. One of what you just said reminds me of. I read this book. It was Thomas More, I think, was the author, and he speaks about how he was thinking in terms of depression, and he compared it kind of like the common cold, where it's not that the common cold is evil. It's just the body saying, "I'm tired. Can you rest?" And it was like he was basically saying that sometimes we need to sit down and have lunch with our demons, and dialogue with them, and by demons he's referring to, the issues or whatever.
Our struggles, our pain.
Pain and stuff like that. And so that's the first thing. It's kind of, that getting comfortable with sitting down with, having a conversation with them, hearing them, listening. The second thing that catches my attention is you said lack of being known. And I have a question for you in that, because when is being known healthy and when it's not healthy?
Man, that's a really complex question. We could talk forever about that, I feel like. But no, I think that's a good question, right? Because being known requires vulnerability. And vulnerability, just the essence of that word indicates that there's a potential to be hurt, right? There's a potential to be let down. And so is it appropriate? Is it safe? Is it a healthy thing to always be known by everyone? It's probably not, and probably not realistic, right? To think that I'm going to be known on the same level by every person that I happen to encounter in my life, probably not. But on the other hand, the process of vulnerability and being known, it's interesting how loneliness so quickly ties into our understanding of our worth and our relationship to ourselves.
What do you mean?
So being able to experience true connection in a lot of ways requires us to understand ourselves first, and to understand who we are, and to understand our worth apart from other people, apart from relationships, to understand that first. And when I understand myself, and when I have a sense of my value and my worth because of who I am, because I'm a created being by God, then suddenly I find myself being able to be a more authentic, open version of myself, regardless of who I encounter, because there's a sense of confidence of knowing who I am. And so there's some level of vulnerability that exists then in anyone that I interact with. Now, does that go deeper within relationship? Yes, and it can go beyond that with individuals who demonstrate themselves to be safe and consistent and healthy people in our lives. But knowing myself, knowing my worth, allows me to operate in my world in a much more vulnerable way, in a much more open way.
I'm hearing you say, and just to clarify, so you're saying that we have to connect and be connected with ourselves before we can really experience a healthy connection with another person?
Yeah. And that seems overwhelming probably and daunting.
Yes, it does.
Right? To think, oh no, I've got to get myself figured out before I can get out there and connect with other people, and this is never going to happen. I'm not ready. Right, but honestly, I think that it's a thing that works hand in hand, and a thing that kind of grows in both contexts. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that connection with other people is is an easier process when we're connected with ourselves. And probably the biggest reason why that is that when I approach a relationship for affirmation, that relationship's going to look really different than if I'm approaching a relationship from a place of maybe comfort in who I am, and then it's about connection.
Can you break that down a little bit? Or maybe can you give an example of maybe a situation where going into a relationship for affirmation versus going into a relationship from a place of kind of this self affirmation, this security?
Well, maybe the best way to describe that is that, when I am approaching a relationship for affirmation, that means I'm approaching a relationship looking to gain something. And so my focus is probably going to be inward, right? I'm going to be looking at myself. I'm going to be looking at what I need. And probably all of us have experienced an interaction like that, right? Where we're in a situation and it's probably pretty emotionally taxing because we're trying to think like, okay, do they like me? I feel like they like me. Am I coming across the right way? We're second guessing ourselves. We're questioning everything. And so the focus is inward, and we really are looking at the relationship in some way as transactional. What can I get from this that makes me feel solid, that makes me feel secure? Versus if I have, and none of us have that perfectly, right? But if I have a bit of a sense of groundedness in who I am, I approach relationship maybe a little bit more in a curious fashion, in an interested fashion. I'm more able to listen. I'm more able to be open. I'm more able to share myself instead of present myself. So it changes relationship in a pretty drastic way.
So instead of transactional, it becomes, what does it become?
Relational. Yeah.
It's
connected.
That's very interesting, because it sounds to me, when I'm hearing you, it sounds to me that there is one of the key reasons why loneliness becomes part of our experience, and at the same time, I'm hearing one of the prescriptions in order to cope with loneliness and put it in a healthy perspective. It sounds to me, because if I approach relationship from the point of affirmation, I'm gonna find myself lonely at some point, because if the transaction is not always there, and it's not, and the other thing is that the transaction needs to happen the way I want it to happen.
That is so true.
Which is another problem, and so at some point I'm gonna end up in a place of loneliness there, as opposed to the others that you mentioned, as we come to the relationship as curious, in a relational kind of vibe, kind of deal thing. It sounds to me that is more, okay, here, this is who I am. Which reminds me of what we have mentioned Brene Brown in this podcast several times.
Big fan.
And and she one of the things she mentioned is that vulnerable people are the happiest people. And it's because of that. I think that's the dynamic that she's referring to. Just approaching life in a very curious way and enjoying, who I am as the people that I meet or I relate to.
Yeah.
Lauren, is that bringing anything to your mind, or I don't know if you have a comment on this at all?
You said something about like affirmation and how you go to a person for that kind of reassurance, in yourself, and I just see that it's kind of like a endless loop, because sometimes, like you said, you want that transaction, and you want that transaction to happen your way. You want to hear the words that coming from them that you want to hear. Like sometimes it's hard for people to be vulnerable and accept what others are saying, so and then once they don't get what they want, they keep going and going and going, and then you end up lonely because you're not getting what you want. You're not hearing what you need to hear. You're hearing what I don't know how to word it.
No, I think
it's
that's
like
a good point.
It's like you go to somebody and you expect them to tell you what you want them to tell you. It's not what their own personal thing is. Like, hey, I think you should do this. Like, no, I want you to tell me what I know I should do.
Trying to manipulate an outcome,
kind of that thing. That's when it's transactional. It's not like an operational, like win-win kind of thing. It's only win-lose. So I just thought about that because I took a speech class this week, and we were talking about like the different kinds of communication. oh, sorry, my face is getting red. I don't like talking. Anyway.
You're good.
I'm there with you.
Yeah, but anyway, we were just talking about like the different kinds of communication and how that affects an individual. Like I forgot the term, but there's like operational, there's like a parasite one. I don't know, I don't like that term, but it's like when only one person wins and it's kind of like
Win,
that
lose,
thing. Yeah, and like the
everything.
way you communicate, the way you communicate to others and within yourselves determines like your own mental health and like the health between you and that person. I don't know if that relates to anything that we're talking about, but I don't know, I just thought about that 'cause I'm just hearing like common words flowing between the three of y'all. Something.
I think something that I'm hearing from y'all is, and I want to ask you if this is true.
Okay.
Just to make sure, so if you're feeling lonely, it's sounding like you need, like, the place to start is a little bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So instead of like, I'm feeling lonely, so get out there and try to, go
And
get something
numb
from
this
someone,
feeling,
It's, I'm feeling lonely, so I need to spend some time with myself.
Yeah, I need to spend some time and get comfortable with the feeling and learn that I can tolerate it versus needing to avoid it, needing to run from it. And I mean, that's the case with so many hard feelings, right? But I feel like loneliness is often at the core of that. And interestingly enough, loneliness is so highly related and connected to addiction problems. That,
Can you tell us more about that?
well, I mean, the idea is that this feeling of loneliness and this feeling of disconnectedness is highly distressing. We're relational beings, and we are made to be in connection and to be in relationship with people and to be known by people.
You need that to survive,
Yeah, it's
like one of our human needs.
Absolutely. And so when that is missing and when that pain is there, our tendency is to seek a substitute, and to seek a way to numb the feeling. And we do that in so many ways. We all numb. Every day we all numb. When you pick up your phone and mindlessly hop onto a social media app, you're numbing in some ways, especially, and that doesn't mean every time you're looking at your social media that's a bad thing, but especially if you're paying attention, you probably will notice triggers, times that you find yourself feeling anxious in a situation, or you find yourself feeling lonely, or you're, something's going on that you're worried about, whatever, and it's such a quick response, right? I pick up my phone and I look at that, and I can numb from it, I can disconnect from that feeling, and so that lets us understand why addiction can be so driven by that, that feeling is difficult. And so when, I drink, when I take some kind of drug, other types of addictions, there's so many out there, that is kind of a substitute in a way to fill that void in that moment and to numb from the feeling.
It's a temporary feeling, and when like you don't when you don't look for help or something like a healthy coping mechanism to fill that void with, like, it's just temporary. So once it wears off, it's just like an empty loop of loneliness. It's just really sad to hear about. You were saying like how do you get out there? Like for those that are listening, it's so hard to put yourself out there, especially if you're not extroverted. Maybe you're introverted, or you are extroverted and you just don't know how to connect. Like what's like the first step? Do you admit to yourself, like, I know I have this problem, that I'm dealing with this emotion? Like, what are like some steps to get out there,
That's a great question. I think, it starts with being able to identify the feeling, to recognize it for what it is, because sometimes we miss it. We don't realize what that feeling is. So being able to recognize this is loneliness, and this is me needing connection and me wanting to be known. So recognize it, name it for yourself, and learn to kind of be okay with that. Don't let that shame come in with it that says I'm bad, or there's something wrong with me that I feel.
Y'all hear that? It's okay to not be okay.
That's right. Don't let that feeling that message come in that says there's something wrong with me that I feel this way. But instead, acknowledging this is what I'm made for, and this is okay that I feel this way. This is a longing of my heart that's coming through here.
We're human, what can we do?
Yeah.
We have feelings.
That's right. So once we learn to be okay with the feeling, that does help us tolerate it. That it says it's not bad, this is not bad, or this is not wrong, but this is just a part of me and what I need. Then the next step is to essentially, everything in us tells us don't be vulnerable. Present a version of yourself that's acceptable, that's the
culture now.
Yes.
Switching.
Code switching. There, you should tune into our last podcast, whatever it was, code switching.
Episode 8.
Episode 8.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so hard.
That we, everything in us is present a version of yourself. Present this mask, and one that's gonna be, liked and valued and seen as productive and great and all those things. But that's where it's important for us to step into that vulnerability. And the truth is that we find that the more that we do that, when we put little steps forward to say, like, this is something real about me, maybe this is something that I'm struggling with, or just saying, I've been finding myself feeling lonely, right? Put a little bit out there. Often what we find is that person sees that vulnerability and is willing to step in, right? Because that's so inviting, and it's so powerful when we experience realness from other people, you know? And so lots of times what we find is that the more that we kind of step into that we start getting positive responses. And it's different from that feedback that you were talking about before of like, I'm presenting this, like I'm performing and presenting this version of myself and needing your affirmation from me, and then I feel like this pressure to be able to do it over and over again. Right?
Yeah,
but
it gets tiring.
Yeah, but instead I'm being open, I'm being vulnerable, I'm presenting some realness, and I get something positive back. Like, oh, that makes me feel a little bit more brave to do it again.
I need to ask you a question about that. Because
you good?
Well, it's because this has been an area, honestly, that I've struggled with for a while. So I've been on both extremes here. If I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay.
So I've lived that whole like performance life.
Yes.
And totally valuing myself based on what other people thought of me. We were talking about it a little bit, especially with I grew up, in the church, and then I was also in kind of some visible roles in the church, and so. Wanting to portray an image, wanting to be an example. I think like good things. Yeah. But somewhere along the way, it became all about those things and hiding the difficult human parts about myself and not having anyone to connect with. So then it was like, I need to be vulnerable. I heard like a TED Talk, Brene Brown.
Brene Brown.
So I'm gonna be vulnerable. So then I swung to the other side, right, and probably like started like oversharing with people. And so I guess I want to ask you what is like maybe a healthy way to start being vulnerable? Maybe someone's listening to this and you're like, oh wow, like I really do hide a lot. Yeah. But like, what is a healthy way to start with vulnerability? Yeah. It seems so scary.
Right.
Right.
Breathe. Well, in some ways, it's just such basic things, right? Than necessarily having to disclose every painful thing in your life right up front, right? But maybe it's just something so basic as just being able, like the little white lies that we tell all the time, probably, that make us feel a little bit more secure, and they can be so inconsequential, but in those moments we just find ourselves doing that in knee-jerk, right? Because we want to be accepted, we want to appear a certain way. So sometimes it can be in the little things, just the willingness to just be honest about certain small things. But the other thing here is that honestly what we get into next is boundaries. When you're asking where's the middle ground, boundaries are in relationship are essential for keeping us safe. And so I like to think about boundaries as kind of like these concentric circles, and knowing that, like the person on the street that I've never met, they belong like way out there in the farthest circle, right? I don't know anything about them. I don't know if they're safe. And so I don't let them in. But then as maybe that person on the street, as I get to know them a little bit, maybe have some interactions, I learn their name, like maybe they step in a little bit, and so I give them a little bit more. And the reality is that we've got these circles that are close around us, and these are the people that ideally have shown consistently over a period of time that they're safe for us, right? And we learn that someone is safe by giving them bits at a time. So I give you a little bit and I see what you do with it. Do you protect it? Are you respectful of it? Do you respond to me in an accepting way? Or do I find I receive judgment? Or do I find over time that maybe that stuff that I gave to you, like you found a way to use it, to weaponize it in the future, right?
That's toxic right there.
Yeah, it is. It is. But the reality is, we see that often in relationship. And so boundaries help to inform us and doing that slowly over time, because the truth is that we only learn about a person over time. But boundaries are what inform us. Like, where is it the safest? Where can I really open up in relationship? And then, where are the people that, I'm still vulnerable, I'm still me, but maybe I'm not giving the deepest, darkest, most painful parts of me, right?
So it's a bit of a paradox. Where you can still be open and authentic, but still have it's not that you're being fake, but you have boundaries. So so you're saying there's a difference there.
Yes. Yeah, very much.
Between being a person of boundaries or being a person that is completely guarded.
So in the context that we're currently in, where we have we have the COVID going on, and then we have all the other stuff that's happening around in our world. There's a lot of isolation happening, even within families and closeness. So let me paint a scenario. So there's this person, right? It's part of a family, and they're feeling lonely, right?
Yeah.
But everybody has their technology, right? So you're in a family where nobody's talking to each other because everybody's in their technology. So all these dynamics are happening immediately in the same place with the same intensity and consistency, and just 1 hour. And so I'm struggling to find a question here, but like, it's so loaded that you can be in 1 hour, you can feel lonely, you cannot feel safe, you feel your boundaries are not well established, neither they're being respected well. We're not talking to each other, so communication is not happening right there. So there's a sense of I need to present myself well, and it's not that relational sense. There's not that vulnerability because I'm hiding. I mean, all that in 1 hour. What kind of repercussions can that have in a human being, a person, a family,
a relationship?
In a relationship,
Well, I think with families have definitely felt the pressure of COVID and just all the stressors that are going on right now in our world. Because, and we were talking about this before, is that the current situation of COVID and kind of being more together within our families, that sometimes that can be a really positive thing, but the truth is that it puts a lot of strain on our family relationships, even the really healthiest family relationships. When our world goes from here down to here, it puts a lot more weight and strain on those relationships. We find ourselves looking to the same people for things that maybe, when our lives are a little more normal, we kind of have a wider base of support. So it definitely has put strain on our relationships. And then in our families where maybe things were already hard, this has been a particularly difficult time. And the truth is, we see that domestic violence rates have skyrocketed. Kids are struggling. Young adults are really struggling during this time. I mean, the statistics from the CDC in June were astounding, just looking at the level of depression and suicidality. So there's a lot of strain. But, the truth is that crisis like this, it basically points out where the fault lines are in our relationships and in our families. And that's been the case. I mean, that's really what we're seeing right now. So, it's a lot going on in a close space. And it can be difficult for families to navigate, for sure.
I want to ask a question. In light of in light of all that is happening. I want to ask from your perspective, like, is there, like, how have you been able to find hope? How have you been able to stay positive, or like what is your hope for yourself, but then also for everyone listening? Like is it possible for something else even in the midst of the circumstance, or are we just kind of like, is this like bound to be perpetual?
No, I mean, well, number one, as a Christian, my hope is in Jesus, and knowing that this is not the end of the story, right? And that while we know that things here on earth are messy and probably and will continue to get messier, that's not the end, and that Jesus has freed us from the reality and the sorrow and the sadness of this world. And so, number one, that is our hope, right? And then in my work as a counselor and working with clients, that some who have faith and some who don't, my hope also is in relationship, right? And is in those interactions, whether it's in the counseling office or whether it's these other interactions that these people experience throughout their day, where they see their value in the way that someone treats them, in the way that someone speaks to them, and the reality that healing in our lives, we know, ultimately comes through Jesus, and it comes through relationships. It comes through the relationships that we have with the people around us, and it's so powerful. It's so powerful what relationship does in our lives. And we talked about the converse of that before we started, of understanding what loneliness does to us, not just emotionally and mentally, but like our physical health. But the other side of that is that it lets us know what love and relationship and connection does for us. And it is a healing power. And the power comes through Jesus. And it is expressed through our relationships with each other.
And so even in the midst of this time, you see that with the people that you get to work with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a humbling thing at times when you get to see that, whether you're working with a family or a couple, or even just in the context of individual counseling. It's a humbling thing when you see clients starting to see that hope and start to realize their value and their worth, and the fact that they are lovable and that they are loved and that they're valued.
I think there's beauty in that. I wanted to go back to the word vulnerability. That's such a big word. I can't say that sometimes. Anyway, but like you were talking about relationships, and that kind of brought me to the word of community. Like for many people, an individual draws their strength from somewhere. Christians, we draw our strength from God, relationships, many different things. And especially with the pandemic, I was thinking, like, it's just so beautiful. Like when you are comfortable with yourself and you humble yourself to a point where like, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm going through this. And then you give like little bits of pieces of yourself. Like if the world is at a point where people are comfortable to be vulnerable with each other and give bits and pieces, and other people start to give bits and pieces, like, oh my gosh, you're just like me, and there's such power in unity, in something like that, in something so like it's a common thing with people, like that. You're not the only person that's going through this, and then you have something to relate to, something to talk about, and you can actually draw your strength from others that have that same common, I don't want to say problem or like issue, but it's just that experience, right? Like we all have, like, even though each person and each family is unique, like if people were just so comfortable and to a point where they are okay to humble themselves and give bits and pieces, you find so much power in a united community, especially as Christians. Like, we have like a common thing. We love Jesus. We draw our strength from him. And once we start like sharing that with the world, like, hey, this is where our hope comes from. You can draw your strength from us because we're going to be here for you no matter what. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing, to just know that even when you feel alone, you're not alone. You have these people, your family, your friends, and God is always with us. Like, even though sometimes we may not see him, but he's always here, especially with so many distractions, technology, the stressors. That's just such the beautiful thing about being a human. You have to be put in certain situations to humble yourself and give bits and pieces of yourself to find that community. And I want to use the word refresh refresh like that part of you that was kind of lost, you know? Like some things have to happen to you, sadly, some good, some bad, for you to realize that there's something, you could be better, you know, you could be happier, you know, just take these steps and realize like, hey, I'm struggling, but I know that we can all get through this together, especially with the pandemic, you know, that's what people find, they want something to hope for. Even though people say like, oh, this is the new normal, you know, I hope it's not. I hope it's not the new normal, but we know that there's always going to be something better out there. And
I'm hearing you say like choosing to have that hope rather than resigning, because in some ways, this is a new normal, but in other ways, I feel like as followers of Jesus, we cannot resign to the narrative that is being pushed upon us, because there's some things that are going to be the new normal for the sake of people's safeties, but skyrocketing depression rates should not be the new normal. We should not accept that as a new normal without fighting for people. You know, skyrocketing domestic abuse or skyrocketing polarization and identifying our political life above our life as common humanity, prioritizing factions over common humanity cannot be the new normal. Like, whoa.
And your last point there of just looking how polarized we are and how easy it is to look at the other side, who whatever that happens to be, politically speaking or something else, and to be able to look at them and not see a person, right? That is so easy to do at this point in time, and that causes us to feel lonely, and it causes us to feel, you know, alone in what we believe and what's important to us, right? Because we can get on social media and see all these stances and see all this vitriol and anger, and that can make us feel further isolated. But the interesting thing is that when we're able to look past a stance or a political platform or whatever that is, and get back to what you were saying, which is the common experience that all of us have of wanting to be known and having pain and having gone through hard things, all of us has. As soon as I hear that from someone else, I immediately can see a person and someone that I can connect with and that I can identify with.
So true.
And I think that's the hope there, right? Is that when we go back to that, we can have a lot of hope in knowing that, you know, we're not alone in this, and this is, you know, this doesn't have to be the reality.
I think one of the things that I'm also hearing in this conversation, it's okay to ask for help. I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking for help. If you're a Christian, or maybe if you're not a Christian, you know, there's this guy in the Bible, his name is David, you know, and David is kind of considered one of these giants in the Bible. You know, he was a king, and yet he asked for help. And I would like to read, because as I was hearing the conversation, I went to this verse in Psalms 102. It says, "Hear my prayer, Lord. Let my cry for help come to you. Do not hide your face from me when I am in distress. Turn your ear to me when I call. Answer me quickly." I think that's something that we all can relate to, right? So, you know, if you feel yourself in a place like that, in a place where you need to ask for help, ask for help.
You know, I'm reminded of a friend. Were you gonna continue?
No,
Okay. I'm reminded of a friend with that particular point who has been so brave. He did exactly that. He just came to a place in his life where he wanted something different, and he had the courage to reach out, and now he's experiencing a difference. He's experiencing a difference in his life. And for me, it's something I really admire, his humility. I really admire his willingness to search and to journey, and to not accept where he, you know, that where he was at was where he was going to be forever. So that makes me think of what you're saying.
And I think that brings us back to the beginning of the conversation. Because to have the courage to ask for help, to have the ability to have that courage, means you're going to be vulnerable. Means that you want to be known. You know, means that you're starting to be yourself, you know, as you recognize, I need help, I'm recognizing self, you know, and I think there's so many things involved there that we spoke at the beginning. So,
well, if someone, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Michal Anne, what are a few? I mean, you have mentioned some action steps throughout our conversation. Can you give us like 3 of the top action steps that somebody can take right now and say
for loneliness?
For loneliness.
Yeah. I think one is making a mental list of the people in your life that maybe you haven't at this point, but that you feel could be good opportunities for you to reach out to. Kind of assessing for yourself, where are places of support in my life? Who are the safe people in my life? Make that mental list and then choose somebody and make that action, right? Take that first step of just reaching out. And that could be so far as to say, you know, I'm struggling and I'm having a hard time. Or maybe it's saying, hey, you know, I would really like to spend some time together. And just take that first step of, I think it's the action, right? It's the action of being willing, and that can feel so scary. But I would say be willing to take the action and reach out and be vulnerable in that way, because it's only by doing that that you break the cycle and that you start to get different results from what you've experienced. So I'd say that. I think too, you know, we talked about how important it is too to you know, to be able to connect with yourself. And so along with this, the action of reaching out, I would actually encourage you to look in and to give some space for what you're feeling. And to engage in something, whether it's journaling or, you know, anything like that would allow you to be able to identify the feelings that you're having and to give voice to them. Because when we start to do that, one, we have a better understanding of what's going on and what we're feeling and what's hard and what we're struggling with. And two, we're saying what I feel matters, right? And if what I feel matters, that means that I am behaving in a way that says I matter. So reach out, but also look in and start to give yourself permission to give voice to the things that you're feeling. And third, you know, well, this kind of goes along with reach out, but seek help. Don't be afraid to reach out to a counselor. And, you know, with COVID right now, telehealth is rocking. I mean, everybody's doing it. So, you know, even if you can't get out of your house, if you can't go somewhere, you can find a therapist online and do video therapy. So that, along with that reaching out. And the other thing that we really haven't talked about today, but I feel like is pretty essential, is what we call coping skills. And essentially, what are the things that we do to take care of ourselves when we're struggling and when we're having a hard time? And I would encourage you to really expand those things, expand the list of the things that you do to take care of yourself.
I do have a question about that, because I'm a little confused on that part. What's the difference between numbing and like numbing behaviors and like coping skills?
Sometimes they're one and the same. Sometimes they are. So, and it's really helpful to understand kind of the way that we use our coping skills, because the truth is that sometimes a healthy coping skill for me is distraction. I mean, that's the reality. But when I find myself kind of repetitively always going to that place of distraction, then I don't have balance. So when it comes to coping skills, I really encourage clients and for myself to focus on balance, because sometimes it's appropriate to say, this is not the time for me to think about my loneliness. You know, I'm trying to get this thing done, or I'm trying to do this. And so this is not the time for it. I recognize the feeling. I value it. I'm going to come back to it. Maybe I even write a little bit down to say I can come back to this. But right now it's okay for me to distract myself and to focus on something else.
So it's not like one completely extreme way knocked it down.
No.
Or one completely extreme the other way.
Yeah. Healthy coping involves balance. And so sometimes that's going to be coping that involves social support. That's going to be relational coping. I know I can talk to these people. I know it helps me sometimes just to hang out with my friends, even if I'm not talking about what's going on in my life. So sometimes coping is going to be relational. Sometimes coping is going to be more kind of body focused, exercise, relaxation, those kinds of things. Sometimes coping is going to be spiritual, knowing where I go to in scripture, what do I read, praying. And sometimes coping is going to be more focused on emotional expression and looking inward and kind of journaling and understanding my feelings and having more vocabulary for that. So finding balance in that that's the healthy thing. So yeah, sometimes you are going to distract. Sometimes you are going to numb, and that's okay, and it can be appropriate. But the awareness of it and the willingness to create space to at other times look at and feel the feeling, that's the healthy balance.
Can I borrow that really quick?
Yeah.
I just want to say something. Like, I just wanted to go back to what you said earlier. First, I'm going to read this again. It says, "Turn your ear to me when I call, answer me quickly." And like this is David talking to God, right? So like when he said, "Turn your ear to me when I call, answer me quickly," that is such a human thing to say. Like when I say something, like listen. And you said something about the willingness to search, to put yourself out there, but also I think it's important that people need to have the willingness to listen, you know, because like you'll have a person that is starting to come out of their shell and like actually admitting that there's something going on inside them, and then when they have the courage to actually put themselves out there, and the people that they want to go to won't listen to them, you know, like how is that going to grow? How is that going to help that person? So you actually need to have the willingness to listen,
to be a safe space.
Yes, like and with everything going on, the world is full of so many distractions, and I know it's so easy to like overpower yourself with stuff with work and like, you know, not make time. But if you really want to help that person, especially if that person comes to you and you know that they're going through something, you need to make time to listen, just hear them out, because humans, like you said, they want to be known, they want to be heard, you know. Like sometimes it just comes out like word vomit, and like, you know, you see like the most common thing is, "Oh, I need to talk to my boyfriend," and like a lot of those memes on Instagram is like he's not even listening. But you know, like it's actually important to listen to somebody, and it's just, I cannot stress that enough. Be a space for somebody, like, and when they come to you with trusted emotion, like that's personal stuff, man. Like being vulnerable is hard enough already, and then when you share that with somebody, you gotta be there for that person, especially like in this time. Like let that person draw strength from you, even though you're struggling, you know. And then when you find out like, oh, I'm actually struggling with that too, that's what you can talk about and actually grow together, you know, like
This is where connection happens.
Yes, exactly. So
yeah,
I just think that's important.
Is essential.
So listen.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good point, because you're talking about not just coming from our own personal size, but what happens when others reach out to us.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out, Lauren.
No problem.
Yeah. You know, as we're ending our episode for today, is there anything else that you'd like to mention, Michal Anne, before we end?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like we've covered a lot today. We have.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I could
Absolutely.
talk endlessly, but
Absolutely.
I've enjoyed being here with you guys
Thank
today.
you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Spaces, we love you. Feel free to comment and ask any questions. We'd love to know your questions. We can. It really helps us plan some future episodes. But thanks so much for being with us. Looking forward to our next episode. See you soon. What's up?
Wait. And if you have any prayer requests, or, you know, if you want to talk to us about anything, you need advice, you know, we're always here for you. So, what is it? What's our Instagram? I forgot our Instagram.
Was with Cranky Project.
With Canyon Creek
Yeah,
Project.
Leo's back there.
Yeah,
he wasn't on today,
he was
but
saying, follow us on
feeding
Instagram, shoot us a direct message, like, you know, let us know, we're here for you. We want to be that space that you guys can draw your strength from. And if you have any questions, and, you know, any questions possibly for Miss Michal Anne, you know, I'm sure we can get a hold of her sometime. Anything about mental health or anything that we covered today, like, let us know. We want to be here for you guys.
Sweet. Thank you guys so much.
Sorry.
See you soon.
Bye.